I think we've done a decent job, we hope we've done a decent job at evolving how we think about who we call on and how we sell advertising from the buyer level into a more strategic level. But I think there's a voice that's been missing, or I think objectively we wouldn't say we've done a great job calling on clients and proselytizing. And so what I'm hoping we can do in the next half hour is bring a little bit of that voice to the dialogue, the voice of the client. I'm very pleased to have Tricia Nichols. The music always starts when I say her name.
Thank you for that.
Tricia is the global lead of consumer engagement, media, and partnerships at Gap. She is responsible for developing a global consumer-forward media approach that redefines consumer actions and interactions with the Gap brand, and bringing that to shopper and retail as well. Her background is really unique. She was managing partner at MediaCom, overseeing communications, planning, the alignment of business, science, strategy, digital, and consumer insights for a number of brands. And what is, I think, especially unique is that she had a dual role as a senior marketing manager at PepsiCo, as well as being a group media director at Tracy Locke simultaneously, sort of on loan to PepsiCo. So she directed portfolio projects in emerging media, mobile location-based services, loyalty programs, and the like. She's won a number of great awards. She began her career in media planning at Temerlin McLean and spent 5 years as an adjunct professor at SMU. Let's welcome Tricia Nichols.
Thank you.
Well, we're out of time. So Tricia, you guys put up some great numbers in March. Year-over-year sales up about 8%, revenue up 10%. The company's worth twice as much as it was in 2008. You have 3,000 stores. You have about 14 million customers coming into Gap every week, but it's still been sort of a turnaround. Can you tell us a little bit about your job and what you do at Gap?
Yeah, so Gap about a year ago created what they call the Global Gap Creative Center. And that sits here in New York, and the vision behind that was to have all of the designers sit with a global marketing team so that you're really, as a global marketing team, closer to the product. You understand a little bit more about the inspiration behind the brand, and we can inform better marketing and media decisions that way. So my role in particular is to obviously inform the media strategy, think about what we're going to do in terms of consumer engagement, put the consumer at the middle of it instead of making our brand be at the middle. I think a lot of brands make that mistake. So it is actually about the consumer and their experiences. And then look for other brands that we can partner with that maybe say a lot about where we are and have a lot of the same DNA as our brand.
That's interesting. And because you've been both on the client side and the agency side, how can you describe and help us understand the differences in your mindset depending on which hat you were wearing at various points in your career?
I have to say I enjoyed having both experiences because you build in a lot more empathy. So at the agency side, I thought a lot about, what's the right media plan to accomplish the goal of either awareness or trial or whatever I thought the media goals were. But I wasn't necessarily asking the right questions until I ended up on the client side and realized that there's so much more to what the marketing plan needs to achieve, and media can actually solve for much more of it than we're typically being briefed on. So I think what has changed most is that I asked, when I went back to the agency side, a lot more questions from the CMO. Tell me what else you're trying to do. Are you wanting to build more stores? Do you need people to dwell in a store longer? Do you need other things? So I think it's about getting deeper into the marketing plan and making that something that the media team is actually trying to solve, or the agencies in general. So the empathy for what the clients are up against and bigger problems than just the awareness that we typically were trying to solve for, I think is what was the most inspiring thing about having both roles.
Can you talk a little bit about digital play space specifically and what some of your best and maybe some of your worst, if there have been worst experiences have been?
Yeah. So, it's an interesting medium for us. The best experience I've had is when we really thought about obviously proximity plays a big role in anybody that's a retail brand or a CPG brand. But when we did it best is when we were utilizing the medium to actually leverage a relationship with a retailer. So this is while I was at Pepsi. we utilized actually TV at a gas station to leverage a relationship with the store operator so that they put Pepsi product up closer to the front of the store. But we also, I think, did a really good job of working with our partner in this, media partner, and building content that made sense, because we can't kid ourselves that, you know, someone isn't aware of a brand, or kid ourselves that they really care that it's, you know, shouting at them. We actually put content out there, and then we had a call to action involved with that, and we had actually seen tremendous sales lift from that. So I think it was a multitude of experiences that made that successful, but actually utilizing the creative product in a way that made a lot of sense was the best result.
So how did that come about? You know, was there a call from a specific medium that did that? Was it an agency-driven initiative? How did it come about?
So that's when I was doing the dual role. So I had the benefit of playing client and agency at the same time. But no, it was education from our media partner first and foremost to talk to us about, you know, you have content. This particular product was AMP. We had an alliance with NASCAR. We had content, and that was something that was relevant at a gas station in terms of just even the interest in NASCAR and the audience that was coming, that was viewing the content. But the fact that we had a call to action in our product was an energy-based product, something that we did need not only awareness and trial for, but it was a lot of the media partner opening our eyes to the fact that we had content and that they actually could do something with it to make it exciting, and then measure that for us and show us results back.
In that case, your dual role was actually really helpful.
It was very helpful.
You had both hats. Do you think about, with your client hat on, brand engagement as sort of a funnel? I mean, you know, is there another metaphor that you use? And if there is, where does digital, if you can generalize, where does digital place-based fit in?
We will think about media in terms of, or brand engagement in terms of how it does relate to a transaction. So we do actually think about, you know, media that's closer to the point of purchase. But before we even get to that step, and I think this is what's probably most exciting thing for the industry as you guys build platforms, is we will think about the marketing plan and then the role that media plays for that. And one thing that I really like to think about is there are certain things you can do that inspire purchase, and there are certain things that are purchase inspired. So I actually break down the media plan in those two ways. So anything that inspires a purchase may not be as close to, you know, the point of purchase, but it's saying, hey, that brand is for me. I like to engage with this brand. This brand is about my life. It's relevant to me. It's culturally relevant. The things that are purchase inspired are actually, I think, a lot of the opportunities for digital out of home. They're closer to the point of purchase, but they also talk to the consumer and in some cases, and can tell them how to make a transaction. And I actually like to marry platforms together. So if we're going to do something in digital place-based, we may go out and find like a Foursquare or somebody to actually marry on top of that platform so that we're getting a high level of engagement. So I think it's important to have media play a bigger role. Media can be something that plays a role toward culturally relevant. It can build energy to a brand. It doesn't have to always just use the traditional media words: reach, frequency, engagement.
So as that relates to Gap, I mean, are there specific things that you think about? Because I think those are sort of a very unique way of looking at how you plan, how you think. Do you see specific, how do you plug that into Gap? You know, what are the kinds of things you've seen beyond layering on a Foursquare or another check-in type service?
So for us in particular, you know, Gap is a brand that's about iconic American style, and the heritage of Gap is really interesting. The first store was selling jeans, pants, and discs, so they sold records, tapes. So it was about music, and it was about having, you know, American style and jeans that fit. So we think about that a lot, and what we actually think about digital place-based for is that the culture. So anything close to music, anything close to feeling like it's iconic American style. Actually, just listening to the Times Square, you know, him talking about Times Square as a brand. It's a brand that defines iconic culture, and that's something that we would think about. So it has a lot of mindset opportunity for us, and I know that we can play in both spaces. So the shopper marketing experiences that we can build with digital place-based, as well as, you know, bridging the culture back.
Okay, so I got to ask, like, the S question. You know, with a client hat on, do you think in as siloed a manner as you did perhaps when you were on the agency side?
No, actually, I think that's where it has helped going back and forth. If you think about it as channel planning, I think it can be a mistake. If you break media down and say, well, these are media channels, and these channels each have a different role, that's helpful, but it's limiting to the opportunity that media can play. So these silos, I try to think now, are more in terms of the consumer opportunity. So this is these are media that can do things regarding to culture and building relevance back with music and other platforms. This is media that I can have a one-to-one dialogue with the consumer. This is media that is going to inspire a purchase or be closer to a purchase. So it's getting away from the channel planning silo.
Right. But on the agency side, it still does tend to fall into buckets. And do you see what buckets you now think through you're drawing from specifically?
So I think probably what everyone wants to know is where we take the money from to put it into digital place-based. What are the opportunities? Certainly, I've seen it come from. This has been my experience. So I've pulled it from TV. I've pulled it actually from radio. Radio was an interesting thing that before was about urgency, also closer to point of sale, talking to somebody relevant in a day part. They're on their way to potentially making a purchase or doing their mental to-do list. I've actually repurposed a lot of that money and shifted into digital place-based because I felt like we could accomplish the same tasks, but with a more unique content opportunity. The other places I've even taken it from, you look at things like cable and magazine that offer opportunities to reach specific target audiences, interest groups. I think digital place-based does a great job at that as well, so I've sourced from there. And then there's a huge incremental opportunity because you can solve other retail experiences or even, where somebody might have money set aside for point of sale, shopper marketing, CRM. Those are all opportunities, and I've actually repurposed money from those sources as well.
Was that more on the client side, or was that sort of thinking agency side or the dual role?
Honestly, it started at the agency side.
Yeah.
So it became when I began to really think about what are our clients trying to do, what are they trying to solve for, what other problems do they have that they haven't maybe briefed us on from a media brief because they only wanted to talk to me about the awareness or reach or trial. So it started agency side. But it's rare. I don't think everybody goes to that place.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I mean, and yet, I mean, you actually, I wouldn't have expected radio. I do expect some of television. I do expect some of print for sure. You didn't say out of home, and moving traditional into digital, which is one thing I'm interested in, and the other is sort of how you define success. What constituted success, and how you measured how the change in media behavior or media investment resulted in positive brand metrics in some form.
So measuring success. So I'll address the out of home question. I think that out of home, non-digital out of home, I should say, had a role in and of itself and on its own, and I didn't necessarily see what I could do in digital spaces in terms of place-based as replacing that. I still felt like I was using it in so many different unique ways, and I was using it to test engagement back with our brand or even sales. So measurements of success were, of course, we look at sales lift if we're doing something close to a purchase. But we've also looked at bonding to the brand. We've looked at whether or not people are perceiving the brand as relevant because maybe some place we've put the brand and we've aligned to something like music or film or something more in their lifestyle. I've tried to measure whether or not the strategy of putting the consumer first works. And one thing I have told media partners that come visit us, and this has come from being at the brand side, please don't walk in the door and show me your media platform and how well it's going to, where my brand is going to be. Your brand will be here, and it can flash from a mountain, and we can make everybody see, the word Gap flip over and create great things. If the consumer doesn't care and if it's not relevant to them, I actually don't care. And what I really try to do is say, would I want this experience if I'm the target audience? Would I want this experience, or is this something that if you were to walk the consumer experience journey, if you were to tell me about that, is it even compelling or is it too complicated? There's all those factors. And that's also hard. I don't think agencies are trained always to, agencies are doing a much better job at that, but I think it's not just trying to make my brand stand out. Actually, it's does the consumer want to see my brand there?
Yeah, and how you define success may be a little bit different than how an agency is trained to expect success or be measured, which is an issue in itself. Is there are there barriers that you can see or help us understand that might be barring the growth of digital place-based, digital out-of-home from a client perspective, more investment?
Yeah, there's two big ones, and I'm certainly trying to solve for these at Gap. One is when the creative product is done first and then the media plan is created. Because then you're just basically looking for media to take that creative message and get it out. So much right now that's being built, and also just thinking about the Times Square presentation, media can actually drive what the creative is going to be based on how compelling or interesting that experience is. So if you can get ahead of the creative product, and I think media agencies, this is a great opportunity for them, and I spent time just recently at MediaCom, and we did a good job of that, trying to be ahead of the creative product because we were a media agency separated from the creative agency. So you have to be ahead of the creative product so that you can drive that, and I think that lands platforms like digital place-based onto the media plan quicker, and then just getting away from the channel planning mentality as much as you can. I think that's key.
Do you have any advice on how to get away from the channel planning mentality?
Yeah, it is about putting the consumer first. It is hard because agencies actually are sometimes set up to create channels in different groups. You need that advocate inside the agency that touches all those groups together and can think about the role that media is playing before they get into the channel plan. It's going to be a dialogue between the media partners and the agencies to get to that point. I think media partners can help educate the agency in that. Hey, you can look at me as a platform for this and this and this. Even thinking about how I repurposed radio was a little bit different thinking. So I think media partners have to play a role in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you started to allude to in terms of how you have invested is interactivity. Do you view interactivity as critical to the growth or even in the media role of digital place-based?
I do. Right now there's such a momentum behind social loyalty. So loyalty programs that you can build on a digital place-based platform actually would be the base of the idea. But social interactions where if you tweet this, if you do something and then let it check in somewhere and let it go into your news feed so that your social network is seeing it, and then the brand gives you some sort of offer back or gives you some sort of loyalty engagement for that. I think that's really an interesting place, and I've seen a lot more technologies now come in that deal with, we have a platform, a base platform, but we also have a way for you to include your social network and interact with it. It's actually becoming a loyalty program for brands. It's really interesting. So I walk it into now the group that handles loyalty for Gap, which I would have never called them before in a traditional media sense.
And are there case studies that you can talk to and examples where you've seen that really work in ways that you would define being very successful?
I have. It was actually, we created an integrated experience with this is at Pepsi, but we created an interactive experience for a retailer, and we actually employed digital media outside the store. We had digital media inside the store. We created a Foursquare program where they checked in. We used the digital media to tell people about the program and to educate them on our Foursquare Alliance. If they checked in and they tied their loyalty card to their Foursquare account based on anything they did in their life, so if they had been at the gym that day, if they had actually earned the gym rat badge, or if they had been at a school library, whatever they were doing, we would read that Foursquare account, and the grocery store would then give them Pepsi product based on what they've done. You've been to the gym, you got the gym rat badge, you get a Gatorade. You have checked in at the school library in the morning, you need to fuel up, we're going to give you a Quaker bar. So it was really interesting that we utilized digital place-based to inform and educate and to talk about the brand alliance, and then used Foursquare to create a social platform, and then lifestyle, give them rewards based on their lifestyle that was before they were ever inside the store. So this was really interesting. And then it loaded into everyone's news feeds, and we watched, results on Twitter and Facebook and social networks. So it was really interesting, and what it did is it created a loyalty. The store owners got to see more millennials signing up for loyalty cards within that particular retail store, so they benefited. So it's also about everybody understanding everybody's benefit in the picture.
Was that sort of deal-based, or was that just, hey, I heard it from a friend, and so I signed up? I mean, what was it that spurred them, do you think?
It was offer-based for
Yeah.
the most part. We gave away product, and they got a lot of, and I think actually the insights that lead into that. Millennials love exclusivity. They don't want to walk by and see Gap is 40% off on the door. They want to have an exclusive offer that feels like it's just for them.
Right.
And that was a critical insight that led to that.
So a lot of what you talked about loyalty, you've talked about interactivity, you've talked about changing how you think about sort of silos. Go out, are you tasking agencies differently than you did a few years ago? And can you be specific about how you've changed that, if you have?
Yes, so this is actually really recent. I try really hard to be involved in any technology that's emerging and coming to the fold. It's related to our industry, obviously. And now I've asked agencies to get involved in that. So there's things like Digital Media Roundtable, there's incubation programs, there's even advisory boards you can get on that interact with venture capitalists as they're reviewing certain technologies that are about to flip over and turn into an advertising medium. So I think it's really interesting to stay ahead of that and to be looking at technologies, even help incubate them. And I think the marriage of platforms is really unique. So if, I mentioned Foursquare marrying up to one of our digital place-based media partners, that was an interesting thing. So I'm asking the agencies to be with me on that, right, to get involved in that kind of thinking, be ahead of the technology.
Interesting. And so who at the agency level do you think is sort of the key player there in terms of integrating these things?
So having, again, just really sat at the agency side most recently, I can talk very specifically. It would be a combination of, the role that I played there, working with our lead person in digital, our lead person on the outdoor side, and our lead person even on the broadcast side. I have to task all of them with that because a technology can pop up out of anywhere. So you don't, what a technology may present itself as first, may change and it may turn into something that you can use it differently. And I think we all have to be sort of sitting on top of that together.
Yeah. We have a couple minutes left. I have a couple more questions, but I do want to have a chance to open it up to the audience. Are there any questions that you'd like to share?
So you've been on the agency side, you've been on the client side. Have you thought about being on the publishing side? Obviously, you have a lot of locations and a lot of screens that you own. Have you thought about doing a Walmart, and creating a network for third-party advertisers and brands?
So, yeah, as Gap, we one of the things I've said internally is we think of ourselves as the original API. So a lot of technologies now, a Facebook or Foursquare, they have what's called an open API, so you can add on top of their platform and use their platform as a base. We certainly provide that. So we are actually aggressively working with other brands and saying, hey, we have brick and mortar. We have an opportunity for you to get your brand out there. We're global. If you're about to expand, we can help you create a brand identity globally. So that is actually very, very much where we are. And that's why part of my role is brand partnerships, because it may not be a media partner that we're talking to. It might be, and it might be another brand in the space. So, yeah, good question.
When you have a question, please stand and mention your name and company. Thanks.
Joe Mandisi, Media Post.
Sure. Dave Botkin, AdSpace. As these digital out-of-home companies are slowly growing and evolving, when does coverage come into play with a major retailer like Gap? Like, what's the footprint that is required to break into these retailers that have been around for so many years?
That's a great question. We do. There are times that we will think about a footprint specific to where we sit in a market or how many markets we're in. But I think because we see ourselves as more of an iconic cultural brand, we are wanting to engage people where they are more consuming culture. So we're not necessarily tied to you have to be near our store or you have to only be in the top 10 DMAs. I think for us, we're trying to be relevant with particular audiences, and that relevance comes from more of where they are, not necessarily where we are. So yeah, I think it's a safe bet to say we're pretty open on to that.
Hi, good morning. Jim, nice job. It's wonderful to have an advertiser here because you're in charge. Tony Jarvis, Olympic Media Consultancy. You're a very sophisticated marketer with a lot of CRM data. I'm guessing, and I may be wrong, you use marketing mix modeling. So And the marketing mix modeling, typically you have to deal at the channel or what I'll call the media suite area, because it doesn't support evaluation at the media vehicle level. And I like what you were saying about, you know, the problem with channels. So do you use ROI, marketing mix modeling, and what role does it play and what's the influence in the final plan?
That's a great question. So we certainly do. We use it to inform the efficacy of the media that we've employed. We're looking at whether or not it's, you know, the most efficient plan possible. I think you know, most brands are using modeling in that way. We're also using modeling to look at bonding to the brand. So if you know, what I want our modeling to do is to say, if I'm trying to attain traffic goals or if I'm trying to attain sales goal, that's critical, but I'm also wanting people to bond to the brand because we don't suffer from an awareness problem. We want people to bond. Bonding represents a higher share of wallet. So I certainly look at modeling almost first as, you know, I put that aside and say this is that inform here, but then we add the art on top of it where we start to think about how media is inspiring a purchase, or maybe it's purchase inspired based on the platform itself. So it's almost two pieces of paper that I've got in front of me when we're making our decisions, and that's a great question because it is important. You have to stay to the science and marry the art.
Any other questions? I think, Tricia, you've earned your Mayor of Media Post badge. Thank you very much.